That match has finished Manchester United 3, West Ham United 0. Ultimately, what I'm going to go on to explain now is a game where a team with an attacking midfielder and a striker played against a team without either of those things. And I think ultimately that was probably the deciding factor in it. Now, there's a lot of fallout from the fact that we've had a bad transfer window, for the lack of creativity in our team. I'm going to deal with that tomorrow. So I was almost going to park the bus, which ironically is what Manchester United did in the first half. I'm going to park the bus on that and deal with a lot of that stuff tomorrow. I'm just going to discuss the game today as best I can. Look, 3-0, it was a game of two halves. It really, really was. West Ham were the best team in the first half. Manchester United were the best team in the second half. As I alluded to at the start of the video, when we were on top, we couldn't score. When they were on top, they could score. It is, well, maybe it's not as simple as that. There's obviously other stuff to be discussed as well. It was actually quite depressing in the second half, particularly watching our defensive players having shots and just knowing that they're just not capable of doing it, really. And, you know, there was a real sort of incision and a real sort of clinical finish in pretty much everything that Manchester United did, but I can't sit here and tell you they were loads better than us. They really weren't. Don't take my word for it. Go and look at the stats, particularly from that first half. West Ham had loads of attacks. There was quite a damning statistic, actually, which one of the commentators mentioned at some point during the game, which is in the first half, West Ham had created more chances at Old Trafford than David Moyes has enjoyed at any point during his career, and that's including when he managed Manchester United, which I thought was quite a crazy stat. That's a frustrating game. Let's be fair. We've let them overtake us, and I don't really feel that we gave ourselves. We battled and we tried, but we were outgunned. We went into war with unnecessary weapons, basically, and it's really told today, and it's really showed, and it's quite interesting watching what's been happening over the past few weeks. Which is, you know, how do you want to spin it? It's like Gio mentioned in the build-up show. How do you want to spin it? We're undefeated, or we can't win, or whatever the case may be. I think that's really put that to bed now. Now, there's no way of spinning the draw against Sheffield United, the losses against Bristol City, and, you know, pretty much and the draw against Bournemouth. None of that looks good anymore. Let's put it that way. West Ham are going to have to arrest the slide. He tried in the first half. I felt he tried. He was struggling to find a left winger, so he had to come up with a solution. Now, again, tomorrow we'll deal with whose fault it is that he was scrambling to find a left winger, but let's just deal with the fact we were down some creativity. He put Ben Johnson on the right and he stuck Kudus on the left. Ben Johnson was our best player in the first half. Him or Edson Alvarez, something like that. I think he had the most shots were by Ben Johnson, and I've got nothing bad to say about Johnson at all. I think I'm just disappointed that we were relying on this player yet again to try and do something for us. As far as David Moyes is concerned, he is a utility player at West Ham who may not be getting a new contract yet. I felt if anything, if West Ham were going to score or create, it was going to come from him. Jarrod Bowen was incredibly isolated during the game. It was really frustrating. Funny enough, he did get a chance very close to the end. He took too much time. I think it was Dalot came back and got the tackle in. Kudus was okay on the left-hand side. I felt a little bit sorry for him, it has to be said. Clearly not his chosen position, but I do think playing him on the left-hand side is a better option than maybe any of the other things. I think the problem was we just didn't have enough attacking players to spread it throughout the team. And we really lacked a playmaker in this game. As I mentioned, Edson Alvarez was really good. Some worrying. I'm increasingly more worried about Kurt Zouma, actually. Kurt Zouma, right near the end, he just about made a clearance. And when I say just about, he doesn't appear to be able to sort of lift his leg sort of beyond about 55 degrees. I think most footballers can lift their leg to sort of from there to about 90 degrees. He doesn't seem to be able to lift his leg above 55, 60 degrees, and I think I'm possibly being generous then. He just looks increasingly more broken. I think there were times when they tried to isolate him. Anyway, do you know what? I'm rambling on about my frustrations in the game, and I was frustrated because you sort of hope when you have, let's say, some form of dominance at Old Trafford, you're going to hope that you can score, but we couldn't score. And ultimately we didn't look like scoring. I had loads of corners, and that's meant to be James Ward-Prowse's speciality. None of them looked overly threatening. Yeah, I guess there was a header from Thomas Souček. There was a point actually during that where I felt maybe it was Alvarez who was held. There are other times we might have got a penalty there, but this is where we are at the moment. I don't want to place too much emphasis on penalties we might have missed out on, because it does seem at the moment we need stuff like that to score a goal, because it certainly ain't happening from open play. Souček had a good header. Who else had a decent, I think Zuma had sort of a missed header from one of the corners, and I think Agurd had an okay header as well. Most of it, Alvarez had an okay header. So there wasn't awful lot else happening. I'll tell you. Well, let's get to the second goal in just a second. The first goal was a bit of a shame, bit of a mix-up in central midfield between Thomas Souček and James Ward-Prowse. I think James Ward-Prowse was trying to sort of elbow and ease Casemiro off the ball. They didn't talk, Souček and Ward-Prowse. Ward-Prowse wasn't able to outmuscle Casemiro. Casemiro sort of shrugged him off quite easily. Souček had sort of gambled on the fact that Ward-Prowse was going to make that tackle, so he sort of stood up, and it was just complete indecision. He was sort of stood there, not really knowing what to do. And they were just allowed to advance on us. It was Rasmus Hojlund scored it was a really good goal. I've got to say that. It was a really good goal, but it was just that bit of miscommunication allowed a period of indecision, at which point both our centre-backs were sort of backing off. By the time they'd sort of got it right, he'd done a little feint to go one way, went onto his other foot, Hojlund, and he finished. It was a really good goal. But they were 1-0 up, Man U, at that point. They didn't deserve to be, because we were the better team. What was interesting was the second half, when West Ham, we didn't start the half well. There'll be no surprise there, of course. What did happen, though, is we had an attack, and we didn't create the attack. Actually, the attack was created by Emerson. He really timed his challenge well and dispossessed Harry Maguire. And he was in on goal. Sort of that inside left channel. He was a lot closer in than left wing, so I say sort of like inside left forward channel, if you like. He advanced on goal. He had a couple of options. I think he needed to square it early. He didn't do that. The longer he took the ball, the less chance there was to square the ball, because the Man United defenders had cut off that ball back, and he was probably about 6 yards out, and I mean he hoofed it. It was one of those Avett moments. He hoofed it really, really high over. I mean it probably hit the DLR. It was a bad shot. So not almost immediately from Manchester United's next attack, or the next period of possession after that. They came down our end of the pitch and they scored. It was Garnacho. It was a deflected goal. It was just sort of deflected off of, I don't know, a gird. Maybe it hit him there or something like that. But Garnacho had sort of cut inside Emerson. I don't know how much he was thinking of that. I don't blame Emerson for the defending bit. I do sort of blame him for not finishing that or not crossing it. But this is the point I'm sort of trying to make. We were reliant on Emerson to score a goal. We were relying on Ben Johnson and I don't just mean score a tap in. One of our best chances was a sort of 25-yard pile driver from Ben Johnson. This is what we were relying on here. I think later on Calvin Phillips had a shot as well. We'll get onto him in a little bit. I think Edson Alvarez had a massive hoof from just too far out. This is what it was. I'm afraid it wasn't. Well, anyway, so that was 2-0 at that point. That was very early in the second half. It was all one-way traffic after that. They won 3-0, Manchester United. It was another Garnacho goal. What can I say? I don't wish to be mean to Calvin Phillips, and I'm not going to be mean to Calvin Phillips. It was his mistake that led to the goal. That's just the facts. And I have a level of sympathy for him. I think they were in Man United then. They got the ball. They were in 3-on-2, and there you go. But they're very clinical, as I said. They did really well on Garnacho again. The 3-on-2 was obviously the two was Kurt Zouma and Naifer Gerd, and it's always going to be difficult. Then so they scored the third, and I have a level of sympathy for Phillips. He was brought on as a substitute with Maxwell Cornet on 71 minutes, and I mean it didn't really make much difference at all. But I mean, I think he was brought on. Cornet was brought on for Soufal, and Johnson went back up to right back, which I didn't blame him at all. By the way, we had a lot of crosses. Soufal had a lot of crosses today in the game, and they were very, very poor. It's such a shame. It's such a shame. Phillips, I have a level of sympathy for him. Look, he's not going to be used to this. He really isn't. And I hope he'll be a good player for West Ham. I really do. And he certainly does have talent. But this is a guy that's been training for the last 2 years with Pep Guardiola, and before that played for Bielsa at Leeds. He won't have seen much of what's going on at West Ham. You know, he won't have seen much of this style of football. I don't know. I don't know what happened at Leeds before Bielsa. I couldn't really comment on what their style of football was without any sort of prior knowledge. But you sort of get the impression that he's not really seen much of this. Maybe playing for Southgate's England, he might have seen a little bit of something like this. But I guess for him to not have attacking players who are going to relieve the pressure in front of him, it's probably going to be quite difficult. So yeah, hopefully the mistakes will stop, and hopefully we'll see the best of him. Certainly not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. In terms of Calvin Phillips, I do have sympathy for him. I have sympathy for anyone because of this botched transfer window, which, as I say, I'll get onto that tomorrow. As I say, concerns about Kurt Zouma, worried about Bowen being as isolated as he is. He's not strong or physical enough to be a lone striker. I'm not saying he can't play striker. He may well be able to play striker, but he's not like this. He can't play it like this. He did have a really good chance at the end, which, as I mentioned, I described it earlier. Disappointing. We're witnessing a slide down the league. We're witnessing our exit from the FA Cup, witnessing our exit from the League Cup, and this is a frustrating thing to watch because you do get the impression it was easily solved. It was easily rectified in the transfer window, and we've chosen not to do it. And it's not the first time. Anyway, I'm digressing away from the game. There you go. Well done, Ben Johnson. I think well done, Edson Alvarez as well. There was some good stuff there. I by the way, I should probably say Emerson. I thought by and large he had a decent game. It was a bit of a shame that happened to him. West Ham weren't all bad. We were the best team in the first half, and we just had no cutting edge. And I don't, believe it or not, I don't actually blame the players in the team for that at all. I was looking at Bowen, looking at Kudus in this game, thinking that this is a frustrating game for them to play. There were times when we had possession, the ball would get recycled, and it would go back to either Zouma, Soufal, or Souček, and the pass, it would just stop. The fluidity of the passing move would just stop, and that's a tough one. I think that's a tough one. There was certainly a point during the game where Kudus passed it to one of his teammates, and he certainly couldn't believe what happened thereafter. And he was trying really hard. He could see he wanted to throw his arms up in the air. I'm talking about Souček, by the way, and he didn't. He didn't throw his arms up in the air. He just did this. You just saw it. Literally his shoulders sank, and it's. Yes, it's got to be frustrating for these teams to play. And anyway, I'll be back tomorrow to tell you why I'm very, very concerned that West Ham are a one-man team. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry for the miserable old review, but what can you do? We just lost 3-0.